Look at all these spoilers. I need a simple lore topic today. I've been dealing with a lot of big ones lately. I need a nice, small, calm one.
This is unacceptable! Look at you, pests! I will personally throw your beloved Lotus into the sun!
That'll work. Welcome to Lore 101. Today from the world of Warframe, we're talking about the devilishly handsome Councilor Vay Hek.
I am too important for this nonsense!
Vay Hek is the primary boss of Earth in the game, and across his decade of being an antagonist, he's done way more than I initially remembered. We'll explain each of these as we go, but for those who know Warframe, he was largely responsible for the Grustrag Three, the Ghouls, the Baelor Fomorian fleet, a toxin designed to wipe out the Earth's forests, and the destruction of some relays in the game. Yeah, the places where players can hang out with each other, some of them are just gone, maybe forever, because of this guy. But maybe you just know him as the funny screaming space uncle.
No!
Thing is, he didn't always look or act like this, the whole flying robot body with an angry little potato head. No, see, back in the day, Vay Hek looked like this. Well, technically he also looked like this, but that's just an old model. Either way, peep the drip. See, Vay Hek is a member of the Grineer, one of the primary enemy factions in the game. The Grineer are basically all clones pumped out from labs on a species-wide scale. However, because they keep using the same genetic soup to make each generation, all of them have some sort of genetic defect that often degrades their minds and bodies over time. The fact they're still around is largely because a ton get cranked out on a daily basis, they're pretty good at cybernetics, and their empire is an absolutely massive machine of industry. Grineer have one main purpose though, and that is to serve their queens. Well, technically just one queen now. Regardless, the moment you come out of that test tube, you fight and build and destroy for the honor of the queens. If not, you get a stug to the face. This was the environment Vay Hek lived in, surrounded by genetically defunct, often cruel clones that were all tier 3 subs to their abusive queens. At some point, Vay Hek would reach the rank of counselor, which seems to be more of an administrative or militaristic role instead of an advisory one. He's the one in the backlines, designating where people go, funding the creation of ungodly war crimes, and regularly berating both enemies and allies alike. If the Empire ever fell, he would easily get a job as a retail manager. We don't know how he became a counselor, but we do know one of his first achievements. That being, the creation of the Ghouls. See, one day Vay Hek was sitting in his counselor's office when a renowned Grineer scientist named Dr. Tengus came in. You might recognize him if you played the Once Awake quest. Hey, I like coming up with horrifying inventions, and you want to make a name for yourself. So how about you fund some of my things and we'll split the credit? What did you have in mind? What if Grineer were like peas?
I'll take your entire stock!
Thus, the Ghouls were born, seemingly harmless little podlings seeded from orbit that grow into absolute monstrosities within the planet's soil. They would act as surprise shock troops, cheap, fast, deadly, highly compostable, but make sure they have plenty of enemy flesh because they will turn on you in a heartbeat. After the Ghouls got developed though, Vay Hek would get an opportunity to show them off directly to the queens, something almost every Grineer dreams of. So he donned his finest George Washington cosplay and despite jeers from the audience, displayed his abomination showcasing the future of Grineer warfare, and then got his ass kicked into a pit 300 style. Probably why he mostly just flies now. What's wild though is that Dr. Tengus is the one that kicked him in. And there doesn't seem to be a clear reason why. Maybe he wanted all the credit for himself, maybe it was a superioristic thing, like, oh, I just used you, or maybe he just has a weird sense of humor. It's the Grineer, so that would track. Vay Hek got tragically torn apart by his own ghouls, but the queens had taken a liking to him, so they ordered Dr. Tengus to put him back together. Various sets of surgeries and cybernetic enhancements later, and we get the ear-shattering Vay Hek we all know and love. Alright, I finished repairing Vay Hek. What's my next assignment, oh glorious queens? Actually, we want you to continue working for him. What? You're both such a dynamic duo, we'd hate to see you split up after this. You want me to keep working for the man I just shoved in a cannibalistic monster hole who has unreasonable rage issues now? I know, fun, right? It's not confirmed if the queens ordered that, but Tengus did keep working for Vay Hek after this, probably by force, which I just find hilarious. So that's how we got the Vay Hek we know now, but what did he try doing after this? Well, for starters, lop off the heads of all of his political rivals until he stood, or rather floated, at the top as one of the most powerful and influential Grineer in the entire Empire. The days of the well-meaning, timid Vay Hek were over. Now, He was out for power. He also probably took that Ghoul presentation a bit personally. Michael Jordan would be proud. After amassing that power, he then made the very logical move of trying to destroy the Earth's forests.
That escalated quickly.
Vay Hek seems to be the one in charge of Grineer stuff on Earth, meaning that if there's a section not under his control, or Queens forbid, a section that's loyal to the Warframes, he's not a happy camper. Thing is, Earth's forests in the Warframe universe are so overgrown and hard to manage that they can actually form a natural barrier against colonization, leading to huge swaths of land that aren't controlled by anybody. Vay Hek was like, dope, I'll use this thing called the Cicero toxin, probably made by Tengus, to literally just poison the forest so I can clear them out and make more settlements. Thus leading to the Cicero Crisis event of 2013. The Lorax was on vacation, so to combat this, players were tasked with creating and administering an antitoxin to deal with the Cicero one. And even though they mostly succeeded, it's still impressive to see just how many power plays this dude had in his early career. After that outburst though, Vay Hek decided to step back and focus on something he already had experience with, creating things that endanger Grineer soldiers as much as their enemies. Meet the Grustrag Three. The Grustrag Three were originally 3 Grineer soldiers who had a unique genetic defect. They were all twice as good at fighting, but also twice as aggressive, meaning friendly fire was an issue. This would culminate when the 3 were on a troop transport ship heading to a fight and, slaughtered everyone else on board because the ship was taking too long. They wiped out an entire ship of their fellow Grineer because they were bored. Most Warframe players can relate. This was seen as treason, and a Grineer general named Sargus Ruck called for their execution. Instead of doing that, though, Dr. Tengus sent the 3 soldiers to a place called the Grustrag Reconditioning Facility, where he would try to fix their aggressive tendencies because they were still very competent fighters. Sargus Ruck hated that, so he got into beef with Vay Hek that didn't really go anywhere. After some time at the facility, Tengus would call up Vay Hek with an update. Hello, Doctor. Good news, I hope? Kind of? What do you mean? Well, we couldn't really get the Grustrag 3 to stop attacking other Grineer, so we just psychologically trained them to hate Warframes about 300% more. We're hoping that keeps their minds on something that's not their comrades. That doesn't sound like a success. Which is why I made the Grustrag Bolt. When administered, it will lower the 3's damage to other Grineer by 50%, theoretically lowering their friendly body count to an acceptably limited amount. We'll also give them some extra bolts to use on the Warframes so that they also deal less damage to the Grineer. And here's where I kind of have an issue with the story. Brief rant. See, the Grustrag Bolt is an actual mechanic that I believe is still in the game that makes you deal 50% less damage to all Grineer until you get it off. Thing is, I bet a good chunk of you watching didn't even know it was a thing because in order to get one, you and your squad have to fully lose in a fight against the Grustrag 3, and they're not very hard to take down. However, the question stands. Why aren't the Grineer using this type of technology on literally everything? Yeah, at a certain point, Warframe upgrades and modding get to the point where a 50% debuff doesn't mean that much, but still, use it on the other enemy factions, or yourselves even. The Grustrag 3 got it because they had an issue with intentional friendly fire, but in a solar system level war, unintentional friendly fire is still going to be a big issue. If you went up to any modern day general and said, "Sir, I made a thing that will reduce all damage towards us, both friendly and not, by 50% guaranteed," you're president now. That's how it works. Obviously, the gameplay reason is that it might get annoying to players, but this was one thing where I was researching where I went, wait, it does what? Anyways, the 3 soldiers get approved. They're dubbed the Grustrag 3 and are shipped out to help with Grineer invasion missions and back up Vay Hek when he needs it. So now this guy has made 2 things that perfectly embody this.
Y'all got any enemy fire? Is friendly okay?
Oh, no.
After all of that, Vay Hek would spend the next several years of real-world time devoted to mostly 2 things. First, destroying a single merchant village, and second, building the biggest space fleet ever to take over the entire solar system and everything else in big explosions. Bit of a difference in scale, let's get into it. Hi, Footnote Corg here. We're gonna treat these next 2 topics as their own separate stories, so it's not like one leads directly into the other, because trying to line them up chronologically leads to a spaghetti's worth of technicalities. Just know these are 2 stories that Vay Hek had a large part in, and we're gonna talk about them in the typical order a new player would learn about them in-game. So remember how Vay Hek hates when a place on Earth is allied with the Warframes? This is Cetus, a merchant colony on Earth that's protected by not only the Warframes, but also a a giant telepathic and time-stopping tower called the Unum. I'll make a separate video eventually. All you gotta know is that those villagers have some heat defending them, enough to make Vay Hek devote a bunch of resources to try and wipe them out. The first instance of this quarrel comes in the Savah's Vigil quest released in October of 2017. Basically, a long time ago, there was this Warframe named Gara that teamed up with the Unum and Cetus to take down a really big threat. In Savah's Vigil, Vay Hek's forces find a coffer that might contain the secret to Gara's power, so he's like, get that open. Luckily, you're able to team up with the Cetus villagers to open the coffer first, reclaiming Gara's blueprint and helping some personal villager relationship stuff. Funny side note, at one point in the quest, you encounter this big Eidolon monster, and Vay Hek just says, "Look at how majestic that creature is. Blow it the f*** up." At the end of the mission, though, Vay Hek's mad because we just stole his Gara power. Luckily, he wouldn't have to wait long to try and get his revenge. Because in November of 2017, only a month later, a huge infested boil from space crashed near Cetus and started creating a bunch of infested zombies. Vay Hek was like, bet I'll just let the zombies wipe out Cetus and then use this Thrax toxin, also probably made by Tengus, to take out all the zombies afterwards. Easy peasy. Luckily, the Warframes came in again, took out the infested zombies, and destroyed the boil. At least the surface level of it. The boil still had its roots in the planet, meaning it resurfaces every once in a while during the Operation Plaguestar event that crops up in-game. Also worth mentioning that a group in Cetus called the Quills, who can see the future, said, yeah, if this infested boil gets out of control, we've foreseen that Vay Hek's toxin won't work anyways, which, funnily enough, isn't even the biggest blow to Vay Hek's ego during this event. No, that goes to this dude named Kanzu, who at one point calls Vay Hek a 2-bit despot with a mind half an inch wide and a face like a rejected skin graft. This was the beef we were rocking with before Kendrick and Drake. Vay Hek was now 0-2 against the villagers in Warframe, so for round 3, he just started chucking ghouls at him, hoping they'd do something. This results in the occasional Ghoul Purge event in-game that the Warframes always push back. Now you might be thinking, 3 losses in 3 months against villagers. What happened to the dude that shot up the ranks of the Grineer? But to be fair, he did provoke the Iron Golems. Yes, we are the Iron Golems in this scenario, and that lines up way better than it should. Put a pin in the Cetus saga because it's time to talk about our second story, Big Ship Splosions. Back in 2013, before the Cicero Crisis even, there was an event called Operation Sling-Stone. The Corpus, another one of the enemy factions, was up to some shenanigans, so the Grineer embraced their inner Britannian and built a massive fleet of ships to destroy them. This was no ordinary fleet though, as it included a new type of battleship called the Fomorians. Each Fomorian was insanely huge and had enough firepower to take down an entire fleet of normal battleships. Thankfully, the Warframes managed to destroy most of the fleet, but in March of 2014, Vay Hek was like, let's run it back, and started rebuilding the fleet for himself. This resulted in the Tethra's Doom event, where players were tasked with destroying the power cores being built for the Fomorian ships. And if there was anything to show that Vay Hek isn't that good in a military role, this was it. Because 2 days into the event, after the players had seemingly been making good progress, Vay Hek hijacked a dev stream, like IRL, just to announce that we'd only been destroying the auxiliary cores, and the shield cores were the ones we needed to focus on. Buddy, no disrespect, but why are you telling us? You could have just said nothing, we'd have no idea, and you probably would have won. But because of that, the player base redoubled their efforts, took out most of the shield cores, and sent Vay Hek into hiding. But then, this Aristotle of a man said, I ain't hear no bell, took the Fomorians he was able to make, and just made them really, really big. Behold the Baelor Fomorians, more firepower, better armor, and they have cup holders. Luckily, the Lotus, the Warframe's motherly figure, was already 2 steps ahead. After seeing the destructive power of normal Fomorians, she had already started looking into how they could be countered. This search led her to some data about an ancient technology called the Archwing. All-environment flight systems that would allow the Warframes to more evenly meet Vay Hek's spacefaring fleet. However, she still needed a lot more info to actually make blueprints for these things. So she started sending players to these things called Orokin Towers to gather said info. Vay Hek would catch on to this and dispatch his forces to go destroy any records of the Archwings before we could find them. And here's where we get to 2 side characters that, oddly enough, were one of the most interesting things I found while researching this guy. See, the forces that Vay Hek deployed were led by pairs of his, quote, newest and most vicious clones. Those being Venkratel, a ranged sniper, and Sprag, a heavy melee attacker. Narmer. Notice I said pairs, plural. It's a bit weird to describe, but it sounds like Vay Hek cloned a bunch of Sprags, a bunch of Venkratels, grouped them into pairs, and then sent them out on these missions. And the fact that all of them have the same names has to be a logistical nightmare. What I found interesting though is that each pair seems to legitimately care about each other. They got a Smo Ornstein thing going on, where if you eliminate one first, the other will react with genuine sadness or rage, which is not something I often see from Grineer.
Wake up! Venkra! Wake up!
What have you done to her?
You not worm puppet! You sister! My sister!
Little Sprag. Of course this was your doing. I should have known you'd never abandon me.
Some of their dialogue is legitimately endearing and gives off a very strong sisterly bond, which makes me think, is this how the Grineer Queens acted before they went all crazy? We have a separate video on them, but basically the Queens used to be super tight with one another, sisterly warriors in fact, and then they went crazy because of a bunch of stuff, and now they're mean to basically everyone. But I wonder if somehow this parallel was on purpose, maybe? I don't know why Vay Hek designed them this way, given his previous work, and it's unclear how they're the most vicious when the Grustrag Three are right there, but they were super interesting to learn about, and I really hope we see more of them beyond the Orichan sabotage and break Narmer missions they're currently in. Back on track, Lotus and the Warframes versus Vay Hek and his clones fighting over the Archwing records resulted in Operation Gatecrash in September 2014. Eventually, the Warframes would succeed and get their first Archwing blueprint at the beginning of the Archwing Quest, released in October 2014. And not a moment too soon, because at the same time they got those blueprints, Vay Hek finished constructing his fleet. To celebrate, he casually declared war on the Corpus at the end of the Archwing Quest, and then sent his fleet to destroy the newly built relays, the player hub areas I mentioned. This would commence the Operation Eyes of Blight event in December 2014, where players had to try and take down Vay Hek's Fomorians before they could destroy their relays. And to Vay Hek's credit, he actually managed to destroy some. That's what I'm talking about, bud. Third time's the charm, but you got there eventually. And all it cost him was his entire fleet. The bigger they are, the harder they fall, and the Warframes absolutely tore into the Baelor Fomorians using their brand new Archwing technology, destroying almost every ship before they could get to all the relays. But don't worry, because after that, Vay Hek got benched! Those Fomorians ain't cheap, especially the Baelor ones, and at this point Vay Hek had kind of sunk 2 fleets of them in exchange for a couple destroyed relays. The Queens weren't happy, so they sent Vay Hek a letter basically demoting him and saying that fleet management might get handed off to this scientist dude named Tyle Rygor. Hi, me again. Fomorians still crop up in games sometimes due to Grineer invasion missions, but apparently they don't have the capability to destroy relays anymore due to their health decaying over time. From my research, it seems like the only relays that got destroyed were during the Eyes of Blight event, but most of this was from before my time anyway, so if any got destroyed later on, feel free to let me know. Well, that all sucked, but at least this day can't get any worse. While the Queens didn't think the relays were that big of a deal, the Warframes, oh, they were pissed. Behold, the law of retribution, where the developers said, see that guy? Get him.
It'll be my genuine pleasure.
Here, players were tasked with hunting down Vay Hek as revenge for all of that. The Law of Retribution wasn't an event or quest, though. It was something called a trial mission, which were large 8-player mission types that have since been removed from the game. Vay Hek's trial mission was essentially 3 normal missions that ended with an assassination boss fight to take him down. What's funny, though, is that this mission was in the game for about 3 years IRL. But instead of being like normal boss missions, where they're just kind of there for gameplay reasons after you clear them, the 3-year time span seems to be an actual lore point in-game? As in, Vay Hek was canonically hunted by the Warframes for 3 years because of the stuff he pulled, and for those who know Warframe lore, you know how terrifying it would be to get hunted by these things for even a day. The trial mission getting removed seems to imply that eventually we just kind of let him go because we got bigger fish to fry, and now his assassination mission is where we hunt him down after the Archwing stuff. Unsurprisingly, watching his super ships get destroyed, getting demoted, and being chased by superpowered space ninjas for years convinced Vay Hek that maybe interplanetary warfare wasn't for him, so he went back to doing stuff on Earth and Cetus for the next several years. That is, until 2021. Boss, we got new orders from the Queen, singular. I don't think you're gonna like it. At this point, I don't care. I've been ripped apart by my own creations. I lost 2 beautiful Fomorian fleets, and I can't even manage to take over one stupid village. I don't know how much lower I could sink. Apart from being ordered to defend Cetus, you know, the place I've spent so many years fighting against. Whoever wrote this, I love you. In 2021, we got the new War Quest, a massive cinematic experience where the entire system, Grineer, Corpus, and Warframes, had to band together to take on a common foe. And of course, it opens with an assault on Cetus, where we briefly see Vay Hek helping defend the villagers. Specifically, he guides a Grineer soldier named Call 175, the Goat, through the process of trying to detonate a bomb to take out whatever this is. The bomb didn't work though, so I guess that's just another L for the Councilor. After the quest, he just goes back to doing his normal shenanigans, but it was cool to see things come full circle for a bit.
Oh, the Queen!
And as of right now, that is the tale of our beloved boy failure. From nervous Councilor to Grineer powerhouse, to just one of the biggest dumpsterings I've seen. He started at the bottom, rose to the top, and he's far from being back at the bottom, but it feels like he's lost that edge a bit, those big, grand plans that made him a real threat. And to top it off, there's some stuff he's afraid of now, apparently. Call 175, the goat I mentioned earlier, at one point says Vay Hek is scared of Pazul, who's leader of this faction called Narmer, that I'll cover later. Call could just be talking smack, but if that's true, that would be a far cry from the Vay Hek that took over the Grineer and tried to topple planets. The Narmer faction has even brainwashed a lot of Sprags and Venkratels, the power couples I mentioned, to fight for them, which is just a slap in the face. I would feel a bit bad if he wasn't, you know, himself.
Why are these fools still breathing my air?
But give him his dues. He is one of the most prolific members of the Grineer. He just doesn't always hit his mark. For now, it just looks like he's busy managing Earth, constantly scheming to take over Cetus and doing some other military stuff here and there. With his last major appearance being in 2021, it looks like DE is focusing on other things right now. He's played out his part, so it'll probably be a bit before we get any new lore stuff from him. Next video!